Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So in today's episode, we've got a deck tech, and I'm calling this one a Curse Upon You. So this deck tech may or may not focus on a certain type of enchantment aura thingy. You know, curses. Okay. Anyways, today's episode comes to you courtesy of my wonderful patrons. Once a month, patrons get a vote on what commander that they like to see in an upcoming deck tech. The commander that gets the most votes wins. And the commander that got the most votes this month was Ghen Arcanum Weaver. Ghen is a 2/3 human wizard that costs red, white, black. By paying red, white, black, you can tap him and sacrifice an enchantment and return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So Ghen is a very interesting and unique commander that takes Mardu in a very new direction. Enchantments usually aren't that high on Mardu's priority list, but Ghen makes them so. Ghen can essentially take one of your enchantments and exchange it for something else. And you might just have some enchantments or some other effects that really care about when they come into play or leave. And of course, Ghen can really help us make a lot of use out of curses. Now, the main strength of curses is also kind of a weakness. The more curses that you put on one opponent, the more that it weighs them down. But then when that player dies, your curses are gone too. I guess I mean not gone, they do go to your graveyard, and that's actually where Ghen can come in huge. Ghen essentially allows us to reuse curses and to stack them on another player. And again, with those curses, we can get more and more effects that really hamper that opponent and throw a wrench into their plans. So let's start things off by just talking about some of these curses, starting with Curse of Misfortunes. This is essentially the heavy hitter of all curses and the first one that we want to get out if possible. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library for a curse card that doesn't have the same name as a curse attached to enchanted player, put it onto the battlefield attached to that player, then shuffle your library. So this curse essentially gives us free extra curses on each and every single one of our turns. And again, with this, we can grab whatever curse that we want from our library depending on the situation that we're in. So we might go grab something like Curse of Exhaustion. It says enchanted player can't cast more than one spell each turn. This can slow down a lot of decks and can be very effective when one player gets too far ahead. And in the right situation against the right deck, it can even shut down a specific deck like Storm. If you can't cast more than one spell each turn, you're not going to be able to storm off. Another option might be something like Cruel Reality. It says at the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. If that player can't, they lose 5 life. This is a huge effect that can eat away at a player's creatures and planeswalkers and even their life total once they get to a certain point. And speaking of eating away at life totals, there's Curse of Thirst. It says at the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, Curse of Thirst deals damage to that player equal to the number of curses attached to them. So yeah, the more curses that we stack on, the more pain that we inflict. Literally. Now this deck is running a good amount of curses, but there are certain cards that are basically curses but not labeled as curses, and we're also going to be running some of those too. For example, a card like Bitter Feud has a curse type effect, though it's not a curse. As it enters the battlefield, you choose 2 players, and then if a source controlled by one of the chosen players would deal damage to the other chosen player or a permanent that player controls, that source deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. Essentially, it links 2 players together and doubles up all their damage against each other. Now, though this card isn't a curse, it can be especially effective with Ghen. Ghen can essentially make this an instant speed double up damage type effect. With this in our graveyard, our commander can sacrifice another enchantment to get this out of nowhere. If one player is making decisions to attack or block, they're probably not keeping this in mind. So certain creatures that they thought were safe are no longer safe, and then other creatures that got through are going to deal up double the damage. And of course, the reverse effect is also true with this. With this on the field, we can just sacrifice this with Ghen out of nowhere. So one player might have made a decision thinking they had double damage against another player, and then we make a deal with that player and get rid of this. So there's some pretty cool and sneaky things that you can do with certain enchantments like this one. Now, obviously, pretty much all decks need ramp, but let's talk about some specific ways to reduce the cost of some of our spells. First up, Starfield Mystic has enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and whenever an enchantment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1 counter on Starfield Mystic. So this helps out in multiple ways. Obviously, reducing the cost of all of our enchantments is gonna be huge. And that second part isn't really all that necessary, but it is nice. Because every time we sacrifice an enchantment or one gets destroyed, Starfield Mystic gets bigger. So this card not only can save us a lot of mana throughout the game, but it can also be a heavy hitter as well. Another more specific reducer though is Daneth the Capuchin Paragon, which has aura and equipment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So this can help reduce the cost of all of our curses, which are auras. Now we can really utilize these to flood the board with low cost enchantments and curses. And then our commander allows us to exchange those for more expensive ones that are in our graveyard. And we actually have plenty of ways to set ourselves up for this kind of a situation. So when it comes to card advantage for this deck, we want to utilize things like Thrill Possibility, Mesa Enchantress, and Gravebreaker Lamia. A looting effect like Thrill Possibility is going to be perfect for this deck. Essentially, it makes us discard 1 card to draw 2. So if we've got an enchantment that has a high converted mana cost in our hand, we can just ditch it. Because again, our commander essentially allows us to cheat it out at a reduced rate. And then something like Mesa Enchantress can provide us a lot of card advantage throughout the game, saying whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you may draw a card. So when we are casting enchantments, it's basically like a cantrip for us. And again, if we're utilizing that strategy to cast a lot of cheap enchantments, the amount of cards that this can draw us can really add up. And then Gravebreaker Lamia is an absolute incredible tutor for this deck. She's an enchantment creature that has, when she enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. So because she's an enchantment, we can get her out and sacrifice her with our commander. So basically, she tutors up something, puts it in our graveyard, then we sacrifice her with our commander and we get the thing out. We sacrifice another enchantment, we get her back, we go tutor for something, and so on and so forth. Now when it comes to removal, enchantment-based removal effects can be fantastic in this deck, like Seal of Cleansing, the Eldest Reborn, and Martyr's Bond. Seal of Cleansing very simply says, sacrifice it, destroy target artifact or enchantment. So we can use this to deter opponents from casting certain things, or we can use it as a bargaining chip. And again, it's a piece of removal that we can keep getting back with our commander. And speaking of which, the Eldest Reborn is a saga, and its first lore counter is each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Its second is each opponent discards a card, and its third is put target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So because this is a saga, it's actually an enchantment that puts itself back in the graveyard after it's done what it needs to do. So if we want, we can get it back with our commander and repeat the process. And then Martyr's Bond is just an incredible card for this deck. Whenever it or another 9/9 permanent we control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a permanent that shares a card type with it. Our commander's already going to be sacrificing a lot of enchantments, and again, there are other ways for us to sacrifice things too, so this can get out of hand pretty quickly. Now, of course, the main way for us to win with this deck is to curse an opponent to death, essentially. But outside of that, we've got other ways to win as well with things like Ajani's Chosen, Archon of Sun's Grace, and Sigil of the Empty Throne. Ajani's Chosen says whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 white cat creature token. So each and every single time we cast an enchantment or we bring one back with our commander, we're getting a 2/2. And then Archon of Sun's Grace takes us a step further, having Constellation. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 white Pegasus creature token with flying. Oh, and on top of that, Pegasus creatures we control have lifelink. So yeah, a 2/2 lifelinking flyer every single time we get an enchantment out can be very powerful. And then Sigil of the Empty Throne can get us even bigger flyers, but its restriction is that it's on cast. It says whenever you cast an enchantment spell, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. So even though our commander's ability doesn't help with this, again, we've got a ton of enchantments in this deck, and now whenever we cast them, we get an angel that comes along. So on top of all the curses, our opponents might also have to deal with a giant token army as well. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.